I was standing in our kitchen, chewing a spoonful of cold chili, when I learned my marriage was a joke. That's not a metaphor. That's exactly where I was. Next to the fridge, shirt half-buttoned, the spoon still in my mouth. It was 6:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. I had just gotten home from work. My wife didn't hear me come in. She was upstairs, on speakerphone with someone. I wasn't even trying to listen. I had just walked in and reached for leftovers. And then I heard it. "You know what he reminds me of?" she said, pausing for dramatic effect. "That sad little kid in school who always smelled like milk." Laughter erupted through the phone. Hers and someone else's, a woman. I didn't recognize the voice. "I'm serious, Trina. He walks around like he's proud of himself for breathing. Like, look at me. I remembered to put on socks today. I can't take it anymore. I cringe when he speaks." The spoon dropped into the sink with a metallic clink, and I stood there frozen. My mouth still tasted like chili, and I hated that. I hated how ordinary the moment was. How betrayal could feel so boring, so domestic. "I swear," she went on, "I fantasize about him getting hit by a slow-moving bus. Not fatally, just enough to knock the oatmeal out of his hand." More laughter. I backed away from the kitchen. My knees were weak. Not in the poetic way. I mean physically unstable. My legs were shaking, and my brain was trying to eject from my skull like a fighter jet. I walked out the back door. No coat, no phone, just keys. I didn't even close the door behind me. I sat in the car and stared at the windshield for 27 minutes. I know, because the dash clock blinked. I just sat there, breathing through my nose like a loser, trying not to cry into the steering wheel. And then I started laughing. The kind of laugh that makes your neighbors consider calling someone. I wasn't shocked she talked about me like that. I was shocked how comfortable she sounded doing it. Like it was normal. Like I wasn't a person anymore. Just a punchline in her private sitcom. The truth is, I've always been a bit of a background character, even in my own life. People forget my birthday. I get passed over for promotions. I once had a neighbor wave at me every morning for 2 years and still call me Craig. But this was a new low. And something inside me clicked. Not snapped, not yet. Just shifted. I went back inside 20 minutes later. She was in the bathroom doing her skincare routine, humming. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Asked if she wanted tea. She said sure. She had no idea I'd just left her emotionally forever. But that's the thing about leaving. Sometimes the first step is invisible. She didn't see it. But she will. The next morning, I made her breakfast. Scrambled eggs, avocado toast with the everything seasoning she likes, and a little mug of ginger tea with honey stirred exactly 4 times. I even folded the napkin into one of those dumb triangles like we were at a bed and breakfast and not in a house full of invisible rot. She barely looked at it. Just muttered, "Thanks," and scrolled through her phone. Probably looking at memes of dogs in pajamas or whatever people who secretly hate their husbands enjoy at 7 a.m. I sat across from her with the fakest smile I've ever worn. I should have gotten an Oscar for the performance. She left for work like nothing had happened. Like I was still the invisible oatmeal man from her little phone comedy sketch. And once she pulled out of the driveway, I walked straight upstairs, heart pounding. Not because I had a plan, I didn't. Not yet. But I needed something. Some proof. Something to make me feel like I wasn't just being overly sensitive or delusional. I know that sounds weak. I sound weak. But after years of bending myself into a quieter, smaller, softer version of a man just to keep peace, you lose the ability to trust your own feelings. Her laptop was still on the nightstand. I stood there for a good 10 minutes just looking at it. Justifying. Rationalizing. Telling myself this was about self-preservation, not revenge. And then I opened it. No password. Of course. Alara thinks I'm too dumb to snoop or too docile to be a threat. She's not entirely wrong. The first thing I did was open her messages app. The last conversation she had was with someone named M. That's all it said, M. No full name, no picture. I clicked. It wasn't long, but it was enough. M. How was the oatmeal king this morning? Alara. Alive, unfortunately. M. You're evil, lol. Alara. If he knew what I was really doing last Thursday night, he'd dissolve into a puddle of soy milk and passive aggression. M. You're a monster. Alara. He still thinks I was at my sister's birthday. I was at your place, remember? With the wine. And the thing with the blindfold? LMAO. I slammed the laptop shut so hard it echoed. My teeth were clenched so tight my jaw cracked. But I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. Didn't even cry. I laughed again. A weird, quiet, cracked laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone else. I don't even know why. Maybe because it was finally real. Tangible. Ugly. Confirmed. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't smelling milk, whatever that means. I was a joke. A well-fed, polite, predictable, pathetic joke. And I suddenly realized that I couldn't stay in that house another week, another day, maybe not even another night. But I also knew I couldn't just leave, not without her noticing. That would give her too much satisfaction. That would make it too easy. People like Ilara thrive on getting the last word. No. If she wanted to humiliate me in silence, I'd return the favor. I'd make her feel the emptiness she cultivated in me, but I'd do it my way. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had fuel now, and it was burning hotter than it ever had before. And the first ember had just landed. By Friday, I had already started slipping away in pieces. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible, just small, intentional acts of absence. I stopped replying to her texts unless they were direct questions. I stopped filling up her car with gas like I always did on Sundays. I didn't fold the laundry. I didn't ask how her day was. I didn't correct her when she called my favorite band boring background music. I let her live in the illusion that I was still orbiting her, even though I was already charting a course to somewhere else entirely. I'd leave early for work, or so she thought, and just sit in the parking lot of a closed bookstore downtown, scribbling in a cheap spiral notebook I bought at a gas station. Not writing poetry, not plotting revenge, just writing down everything I had let slide over the years. Every dig, every eye roll, every moment I convinced myself I was overreacting. It wasn't for proof or evidence. It was a eulogy, not for the marriage, but for me, for the man I let her shape me into. Timid, predictable, and just self-aware enough to know I was becoming invisible. That Friday night, she got dressed up. Tight black dress, hair pinned, red lipstick. The kind she only wore when she wanted attention, but not from me. I was on the couch pretending to be half asleep with the TV on mute. She didn't even bother lying. Just grabbed her purse and said she was going out with the girls. No names, no details, no goodnight kiss. I waited until the front door clicked shut, then stood up and opened the blinds just enough to watch her walk to her car. She looked happy, free, like someone heading to a party they knew they'd dominate. I grabbed my keys and left 10 minutes later. Not to follow her. Not yet. I drove to her sister Marcy's house, parked across the street, and waited. Marcy wasn't home. The driveway was empty. All the lights were off. I took a picture with the timestamp and texted it to myself from a burner phone I'd just activated that morning. That message wasn't for me. It was for later, when the time came to ruin her story before she ever got to tell it. I didn't go home right away. I needed air. Real air. The kind that didn't smell like scented candles and silent resentment. I drove out to the lake, the one where I proposed to her 7 years ago. Funny how places can shift like that. Back then it felt like a sacred moment. Now, the whole area felt haunted. I parked by the edge, got out, and just stood there staring into the water, wondering how someone could share your bed for years and still manage to look right through you. And here's the thing that made my hands tremble more than anything else that week. She still hadn't noticed. Not a single question. Not a glance. Not a flicker of curiosity about my distance, my silence, the growing cracks in the daily routine. She didn't notice I changed the password on the Netflix account. She didn't notice I canceled the dinner reservation for our anniversary next month. She didn't notice I hadn't touched her since last Tuesday. And that's when I knew. She had already written me out of her story. I was just a character in reruns, stuck saying the same lines while the audience waited for someone more interesting to walk on stage. So I made a decision. If she was going to erase me from her life, I'd speed up the process. But I'd do it on my terms. No confrontation. No yelling. No explanation. Just silence. And then absence. A clean, surgical exit that would leave her with nothing to fight, no one to blame. Just the vast, echoing space where I used to be. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had emptied most of the drawers in the guest bedroom and moved some of my clothes in there. Not all. Just enough to be unnoticeable unless she was actively looking for signs I'd started disappearing. She wasn't. She was too busy editing photos for someone's baby shower, something she was doing for free because they needed her eye, she said. That was Ilara's favorite self-image, the irreplaceable woman in the room. Meanwhile, I sat across from her at the dining table, organizing tax documents with a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. I had also started recording things. Not the scandalous kind. No hidden cameras or dramatic audio clips. Just moments. Proof of the void. Footage of her walking past me without a glance. Audio of her chuckling on speakerphone with M and complaining about my breathing again. Photos of my untouched dinner plate 3 nights in a row. I wasn't collecting them for leverage. I didn't want revenge in a courtroom. I wanted something colder, something quieter, something psychological. Because what no one tells you about being erased slowly is that you start to fantasize about making your absence hurt more than your presence ever did. I backed up all her cloud accounts. Quietly. Her entire digital archive. Photos, contacts, saved messages, calendar entries. I wasn't going to delete anything. That would be too loud. But I wanted a mirror, a version of her digital life where I could observe the erasure of myself from every corner. It wasn't masochism. It was confirmation. I needed to see how thoroughly she had rewritten the story of us into a narrative where I was nothing more than a useful shadow. Monday morning, she left early. Said she was going to the gym, but she didn't take her gym bag. I asked her about it, just to see how far she'd go. She smiled and said, "They have towels and stuff. I'm good." But I saw it. The hesitation. The flicker of, "Wait, how closely is he watching?" in her eyes. It passed in a second, but it was enough. She was starting to realize I wasn't as dull and distant as I had always let her believe. While she was gone, I did something strange. I walked into our bedroom, opened her nightstand drawer, and took out the little notebook she kept under her socks. Alara never wrote in journals. She said they were for narcissists with time. But this one wasn't hers. It was her mother's. I knew because it had her handwriting in the first few pages, shaky, loopy, deeply personal. The rest of the pages? Alara had filled them in. Not with reflections. With practice stories. Phrases. Explanations. Literally rehearsed excuses. I was at Marcy's, but she left early. He knew I wasn't happy. It wasn't cheating, it was transition. We hadn't been intimate in months. She had drafted a breakup. Edited it like it was a press release. I stood there, notebook in hand, and felt something settle deep in my stomach. Not rage. Not sadness. Something denser. Like gravity. Like finality. She had emotionally left months ago. And I had known. I had felt it. But this notebook proved it was deliberate. Strategic. She was playing the long game. And she thought I was too soft, too slow, too safe to ever notice. So I put the notebook back. Neatly. Exactly as I found it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and drafted an email to my HR department requesting remote status effective immediately. Family reasons. Approved in 2 hours. They didn't even ask questions. That same day, I canceled my personal cell plan and bought a new phone. I updated only 2 contacts, my sister in Vermont and the lawyer I had quietly consulted with 3 weeks ago. By dinner time, I was sitting across from Alara again, nodding at her story about a coworker who microwaved fish in the office and almost caused a mutiny. She laughed. I laughed. She texted someone under the table while I cleared the plates. And that night, as she dozed off early in a hoodie she used to borrow from me, I stood in the hallway and looked at her for what felt like the first time. Not as my wife, not as the woman I fell in love with, but as a person I had never actually known. Not really. And I realized something truly chilling. She wouldn't even miss me when I left. Not at first, but eventually, she would feel the shape of me missing. The absence of something she didn't even value, until it stopped playing its part in the background of her life. And that's what I was building now. An exit so silent, it would echo. By Wednesday, she knew something was wrong. Not enough to confront me. No, Alara doesn't confront. She observes, calculates, shifts stories midair to keep herself comfortably untouchable. But I saw it in the way she looked at me that morning. Her head slightly tilted, eyes squinting like she was reading a label she didn't remember sticking on the jar. She asked if I was feeling okay. I said yes. Then I smiled and asked her if she was. That threw her off. It was small, barely a beat of confusion before she smoothed her expression, but I caught it. She wasn't used to me mirroring. She was used to me absorbing, deflecting, playing the role of the gentle ghost in her house. But I wasn't playing anymore. She poured coffee, but didn't drink it. I watched her stir it 7 times without sipping. Her phone buzzed. Again, probably. And for the first time in months, she flipped it face down instead of reading the message mid-conversation. Later that day, I returned home early from work. I say work because I hadn't stepped foot in the office all week. Instead, I'd been going through safety deposit boxes, pulling documents, erasing digital footprints, closing out minor accounts, Venmo, Dropbox, even the Reddit account I hadn't used since 2018. I left no post-it notes, no sign-in notifications, no trail. My goal was simple. I wanted to disappear so smoothly, so seamlessly, that it would feel like I had only ever existed in her mind. When I got back, the house smelled like her vanilla diffuser, the one that made me nauseous, and something else, tension, real tension. She was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "You didn't text me all day," she said. I shrugged. I didn't realize I needed to. She blinked. "I just meant, never mind. It's weird. That's all." Weird. That was her word for anything not immediately flattering to her self-image. My silence was now weird. My calmness, off. My disappearance? It would probably be filed under unreasonable. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know I had logged into her old email address 2 nights ago, the one she used before we got married. She didn't know I'd seen messages from M, dating back almost 2 years. She didn't know I'd learned that M wasn't short for Maria or Morgan, like she'd joked once. It was Micah, the same Micah who attended our wedding. The same Micah who hugged me and said, "You're a lucky guy, man," before winking at Alara like they shared some hilarious inside joke. Back then I thought it was a harmless moment. Now I know he'd already kissed her by then. Maybe more. I didn't rage. I didn't confront. I didn't even change my tone. Instead, I printed a single photo from one of their private email threads, a grainy, drunken selfie from a hotel room. Her lipstick smudged, his shirt off. The timestamp barely 2 months after our second anniversary. I folded the photo neatly and slid it into her copy of Where the Crawdads Sing, which I knew she was halfway through rereading. She usually picked it up every Sunday night in the bath. I could have sent it to her anonymously. I could have thrown it on the table. But that would have been noise, and I was done with noise. My silence had become my weapon, and I intended to wield it with surgeon-like precision. That evening, she asked me to watch a movie. Something dumb, she said, trying to lighten the air. We hadn't watched a movie together in months. She picked a romantic comedy. I sat through all 103 minutes without speaking once. She laughed 3 times, all forced. I smiled once, genuinely, when the camera cut to a lonely character walking away from a woman who didn't understand him until it was too late. The irony was delicious. That night, we got into bed at the same time. First time in weeks. She turned toward me. I pretended to sleep. She stared at me. I could feel it. But I didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't give her the gift of reaction. She whispered my name once. Then again, I didn't answer. For the first time, she was the ghost in the bed, reaching for someone who was no longer really there. And she knew it. She just didn't know how long it had been true. By Thursday morning, she'd slipped into damage control mode, though she didn't realize yet that the damage had already been done months ago, quietly, methodically, invisibly. I came downstairs to find her making breakfast, which wasn't unusual in itself. What was unusual was that she made my breakfast, eggs, toast, even the same dumb spinach smoothie I used to make for myself before she started calling it swamp sludge. She was smiling too much, talking too much. Her voice had this strange, performative lilt, like she was auditioning for the role of attentive wife, and had no idea the director left the theater a long time ago. I played along, thanking her softly, complimenting the toast, pretending to not notice that her hands were shaking slightly as she poured coffee. She was finally aware of the shift, but not the origin, and that made her nervous. She wasn't used to being off-script. She asked me how my week had been. I told her it was productive. She asked if I wanted to do something this weekend, just the 2 of us. I said, "Sure, sounds good." I never looked up from my plate. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to reset the board. A preemptive strike against the guilt gnawing at her. She wanted to overwrite what she sensed in me with fresh small talk and affection, hoping I was still stupid enough to cling to crumbs. But I wasn't hungry for her scraps anymore. I hadn't been for a long time. That afternoon, while she was out running errands, I executed phase 2. It wasn't flashy, just a set of small closures. Canceled our shared credit card, changed my direct deposit to a private account, removed myself from the lease. The house was hers before we married, and scheduled a moving company for the following Wednesday, when I knew she'd be at her office's monthly department lunch. I wouldn't be taking much. Just books, documents, a few personal items, and the worn gray hoodie she always used to steal back when she still pretended to like me. Everything else she could keep. I wanted her to be surrounded by the relics of my presence, and realized they meant nothing without me in them. Later that night, she brought up intimacy. Not directly, of course. She never did anything directly. Just hinted, flirted, touched my arm, laughed at things I didn't say. I told her I had a headache. I didn't. I just didn't want her to think she still had access to me. She gave a forced chuckle and muttered, "Right. Of course," then rolled over without saying goodnight. Her shoulder blades were tense. I could tell she was awake long after her breathing settled into its fake rhythm. The next morning, I left a USB drive on her vanity. No note, just the drive. Inside it, one folder. Inside that folder, a single file, a screenshot of the hotel confirmation under her name. Room 216. 2 guests. Paid for with our joint card. Dated 5 months ago. I said nothing about it. Didn't ask. Didn't accuse. Just left it there like it had fallen out of the sky. She saw it that evening. I heard the drawer slide open and slam shut. Then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. She didn't bring it up. Didn't confront me. Didn't even mention the folder was missing the attached photos I already knew existed. Because if she asked, she'd have to admit she knew what they were. By Saturday, the panic had started to show. Her questions got sharper, but still dipped in honey. Is something wrong? Are you mad at me? Did I do something? I told her no. I smiled. I kissed her on the forehead like I used to. And the kiss felt like pressing a post-it note onto a wall before tearing the whole house down. She was unraveling now, but doing her best to keep the seams hidden. She baked banana bread. She played the playlist from our 2nd year of marriage, the one with all the songs she used to claim reminded her of me. I listened quietly as she scrubbed dishes to the sound of Norah Jones, pretending her world wasn't cracking underneath her perfectly polished kitchen floor. But the best part? She still thought she was ahead. She had no idea that by this time next week, the house would be emptier, colder, that she'd come home to find drawers half open and closets lightened like the air had taken something with it. And all she'd have left is questions she'd never be brave enough to ask. It happened on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Tuesdays are supposed to be dull, harmless things, too far from the weekend to carry drama, too close to Monday to bother pretending anything exciting might happen. But that Tuesday will be etched in her memory for a long time, I imagine. Not because of what I said, I didn't say much, but because of what she finally allowed herself to feel, fear. I had just gotten out of the shower. Steam still clung to the mirror, and my towel was half looped around my waist. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom like she had been rehearsing her lines all morning, but now couldn't find the courage to deliver them. Her fingers clutched the doorframe like she was afraid the floor might give out from under her. That's when I knew. She'd opened the folder on the USB drive again, and this time, she'd gone deeper. I didn't say anything. I just watched her eyes flicker between hesitation and desperation. "Why are you being like this?" she asked, her voice thinner than usual, sharp around the edges. "You're acting like I don't even know who you are lately." I dried my face slowly, then met her gaze in the mirror. "What do you mean? You're pulling away. You don't talk to me. You don't touch me. You barely look at me. And now you're leaving stuff lying around like you want me to find it." Her voice was rising now, trying to summon anger to cover the cracking beneath. "Is this a game to you?" I turned and leaned against the dresser. "You don't want to play games, Alara. You'd lose." That stopped her. Her jaw tightened. She crossed her arms, but it looked more like armor than defiance. "I know you know," she said, quieter now. "Okay, I'm not an idiot." "No," I replied calmly. "You're just a liar." That landed harder than I thought it would. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked quickly, forcing them dry again. Alara doesn't cry unless it benefits her. And I wasn't giving her an audience this time. "You're being cruel," she said, almost whispering now. "You're trying to hurt me." I tilted my head. That's funny coming from someone who called me lint. Her face went white, like bone. The silence that followed was different than before. Not the silent war of the last few weeks, but the kind that comes right before something bursts. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. That was just venting. "You weren't supposed to hear that. People say stupid things. They don't fantasize about their husbands getting hit by buses," I said, calmly, no bite in my tone. "They don't lie for years, build a second life, write breakup lines in their mother's journal, and then smile over pancakes like everything's fine. Her hands dropped to her sides. She looked so small suddenly, like the queen had just realized she was the only one at the table without a throne. "So what now?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "You leave? Just like that?" I stepped forward, close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to meet my eyes. "I already left, Alara. You just didn't notice." And with that, I walked past her, down the stairs, and out the front door. I didn't take a bag. I didn't make a scene. I didn't slam anything. I just walked out with the weightless calm of a man who had finally laid down the burden of pretending he was loved. She didn't follow me, but I know she stood at the top of the stairs for a long time. Because when I returned the next afternoon, not to stay, but to pack, the scent of her perfume was still heavy in the bedroom, like she'd sprayed it in the air just to feel like she was still present. But her presence didn't haunt the space anymore. I did. The man she never noticed. The man she erased, too slowly. And now, too late. The last morning in that house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not empty. Not eerie. Just still. Like the place had finally exhaled. Like it had been holding its breath alongside me all this time. Waiting for one of us to admit that love, no matter how well constructed, can rot from the inside when it goes unspoken too long. I packed everything I needed into 2 suitcases, one for clothes, one for memory. Not photos of her. Not us. Just small artifacts of the version of me that had quietly existed before I began shrinking to fit inside her life. A copy of a book I once loved before she rolled her eyes at it. A hoodie I hadn't worn in 2 years because she said it made me look like a washed-up RA. A spiral notebook filled with pages I didn't need to write anymore. I didn't take anything that still belonged to our story. I didn't need it. As I zipped up the last bag, I looked around the room one final time. The walls were still painted the soft gray she picked. Her diffuser was still puffing that cloying vanilla scent into the air like it was desperate to be noticed. Her side of the bed was perfectly made, untouched since I started sleeping in the guest room. It was all so intact, and yet so vacant. She wasn't home. She had taken a personal day, which I knew meant she needed space to calculate her next narrative. I didn't blame her. Some people build truth out of what they believe they're owed. Alara wasn't evil, just hollow in the places where empathy was supposed to grow. I left my key on the kitchen counter. No letter. No drama. I didn't want to leave her with closure. That would have been a gift. Instead, I left her with silence. And if she's smart, she'll fill it with questions about herself, not me. I drove for 12 hours that day. Through fields, past gas stations, across 2 state lines. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even listen to music. I just let the tires hum beneath me like a lullaby. It was the kind of peace you don't recognize until you remember what it's like to live without weight on your chest. I stopped once at a diner somewhere outside Asheville and ordered a slice of cherry pie. It was too sweet, and the coffee was terrible, but I couldn't stop smiling. The next few weeks were quiet, not lonely, just clean. I signed a short-term lease in a small town where no one knew my name. Got a job doing freelance systems audits from a converted storage room above a bookstore. I walk more now. I read more. I cook for myself, badly, but with actual joy. I bought a second-hand bike and ride it through neighborhoods filled with people who wave without expecting anything. Sometimes I think about the version of me she knew, the quiet man with his oatmeal and his patience and his shrinking shoulders. And I feel sad for him. Not because he was weak, but because he thought love meant survival. That to keep something alive, you had to let yourself die a little every day. I don't believe that anymore. Last weekend, at the bookstore downstairs, I met someone. Her name's June. She's got a gap between her front teeth, runs a small photography business, and laughs at her own bad puns. We talked for almost 2 hours about nothing important, which is maybe what made it feel important. I didn't tell her anything about my past. Not yet. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to feel seen. So no, I didn't get revenge. I didn't ruin Alara's life. I didn't expose her. I didn't scream or throw or burn it all down. I just left. Completely. And now, somewhere out there, she's probably standing in our kitchen, holding the key I left behind, wondering how she lost someone who never even slammed the door. That's the thing about ghosts. They don't haunt you with noise. They haunt you with the space they used to fill. And me? I'm not a ghost anymore. I'm free.